Hey guys, and welcome to another JRE review. Today first off, actually, this week Alex Jones is back on Rogan, and I'm about 30 minutes into listening to that episode. I'm telling you right now, it's a doozy. It's so good. And I'm not giving my opinion either way of that guy, but the last time Alex Jones was on for podcast 911, the conspiracy theory podcast, I think it was Joe Rogan's most downloaded podcast ever. So I'm very excited for it, and I cannot wait to finish that. But first, I want to do this review of podcast 1254 with Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil's been around forever, right? I actually didn't realize he wasn't a doctor of medicine. He's a doctor of psychology, but I guess it makes sense for his show. And he seems like a really well thought out individual. I don't know. He was calm. He was collected with the way that he speaks. I mean, obviously he's an adamant professional. He's been on the air forever, but I really liked a lot of his breakdown, and it was a really good conversation to kind of get to know him a little bit better. So let's start the review.
Welcome to the Joeroganexperiencereview, where each week I review every single episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. What more do you want?
So Dr. Phil has a couple of boys, and one of them, I believe, is somewhere around Joe's age. I'm not sure, but Joe is good friends with him somehow. He didn't really explain the connection, just that he knew him well, and that's how he was able to connect this and get him on the show. But a big thing that's happening is that Dr. Phil is starting a podcast. So he's starting his own one called Fill in the Blank, and kind of wants to push that. What's good about his dialogue in a lot of ways, and I never really watched his show very much, though obviously I've seen snippets of it, maybe sat through a bit of it. It's kind of one of those things where you'll be getting your tires changed at Firestone or something, and then for whatever reason that's on the television, so you kind of sit there through it. That's the only places I think I've ever really sat through a bit of an episode, and to me it just seemed like Jerry Springer with a doctor on it. I didn't really ever realize they were getting to the bottom of anything, but through this podcast you hear kind of his process, right? And it's not even so much about helping the people that come on the show that day as much as helping people that are watching, because they can see maybe some of their own actions or family's actions in the actions of the crazy lunatic on the show. I mean, one example that Joe brought up at the very beginning is the Catch Me Outside girl. I don't know anything about this other than I have seen the giant building-sized billboard that they have off of Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood, and it is monstrous. And I was like, who is that girl? And I was told it was the Catch Me Outside girl, and she got famous for this catchphrase and now makes millions of dollars selling makeup or being some sort of celebrity. But anyway, so, you probably know, but she started out on the Dr. Phil show just being a bit of a lunatic and said this kind of outburst, and has gone on to do other things after a meme was made. But a point that he makes, and he has a good message for her, he's like, hopefully she finds her way and surrounds herself with good people and is able to get something positive out of this. But it's the fact that really when he's discussing these issues, when people are on his show with problems and they're fighting with their mother, daughter, whatever, he's creating the dialogue, right? So that when people are watching it, they're able to kind of reflect in their own life, see those problems, and make changes. My question to that was, listening to Joe and Phil's conversation, is how do you know that anything is really changing with people? It's almost like a lot of times I feel like with people, you can watch something, it could be exactly like you are. It could be staring you in the face with all the mistakes that you're making, and all you do is see their problem, their issue, and don't reflect it on yourself at all. You're just like, oh yeah, well those people have that issue because they're crazy, but that wouldn't happen to me, and this isn't how my life is. So I don't know. I don't know how effective TV shows like that are. Do you know anybody that's been affected by someone like Dr. Phil or Dr. Oz or an Oprah and actually made really positive changes? I mean, they must do, right? Because they're popular. They're just not. It's just not anything that really resonates with me. Some of the conversation I really appreciated was when Dr. Phil was talking about changing behaviors, and the patterns are very tough to break. And this is obviously a dialogue that Joe Rogan throws down a lot and really resonates when I'm listening to it. But the point that Dr. Phil was trying to make is really that, in a sense, you get what you think you deserve, right? So if you think you came from a shitty background and everything in your future is going to be shitty, usually it's going to lead that direction. And it's actually being able to change that, saying that, okay, this is where I came from, but things will change. I can do something better. And it's about writing it down, having a goal list. Like Joe says that, like make a list of like things you want to achieve or a future that you want to have, and orient yourself so you can get there closer. He gives the example of something I guess Tony Robbins said about two boats. And you'll hear it on the podcast, but he's just talking about you only have to change the direction of two boats traveling the same way just a couple of degrees. And over a long period of time, those boats are now in completely different places. And that's an important thing to remember. Even if you barely have any energy to make positive changes in your life, like let's say you're just exhausted, right? Your girlfriend's a pain in the ass, maybe your wife is, maybe your kids, whatever. You just don't understand it. You can barely pay your bills. Your boss is just killing you. You don't have any time to work out. You can barely have time to eat right. Well, okay. So that is what it is. And it's awful. And I'm sure you're really struggling with it. And I'm sorry if that's your situation. But then if you look at it like this, if you say, okay, I barely have 1% extra energy to put towards anything because I'm so overwhelmed, right? I think anyone could muster 1%. Just a little bit extra, right? Even if it's just like start your day with 10 minutes of meditation and all the rest of your day is an absolute mess like it usually is, that 10 minutes will go a long way, right? That's your 1 degree of change, and you stick at it and you'll find more room for little bits of change here and there. And before you know it, you start to have a lot more room in your life. Room in your head to get things done. But these messages are important to hear. That's why I love listening to these podcasts and listening to these people talk that have done well and that have seen this over and over again. Like, how many times do you think Dr. Phil has come up against this and had to think about it? A lot. And he has a PhD in psychology, so he sees these behaviors kind of make themselves. And in a way, thank God these behaviors are consistent. It would be an even far more confusing life if somebody could think really terrible things about themselves but somehow still be super successful. I mean, if it was like that, it would be all over the place. You wouldn't know what to aim for. But we know you want to aim for believing in yourself, being confident, working hard, not being afraid of failure, those sorts of things. So it's the clear path. And I think the big issue a lot of time is where to start with the change and how much of a change you need to make. And it's just gradual. Just give people a little bit of a chance. They get into the opioid issue a little bit. I'm not going to cover that on here. Listen to the podcast if you're affected by that or you're more interested. But, they're saying it's massively overprescribed, which a lot of us know about. And then they kind of finish up with some understanding of like where kids are these days and how they're not really given a chance to fail. A lot of times they're coddled and too protected, and therefore once they come into the real world and then they're challenged, because the real world will throw failure at you whether you've been protected from it or not, they don't have a chance. They're not ready for it. Okay? So if you don't fail, you don't grow is a big message that they make, and it'll make you sensitive and very weak. So Dr. Phil says it's important to, what he says, find your currency, okay? What are you passionate about? Have something that gets you up in the morning. Find that reason. I try to monitor that in a lot of ways, especially if I'm off work and it's a weekday. If you find yourself just kind of sitting in bed way too long, giving it like an extra hour of just kind of surfing the web or watching YouTube videos, it tells me that I didn't plan that day properly, right? Or I'm not excited enough to get up and get some work done. So you kind of reassess. I like to give myself something exciting and fun to do in the morning right away. Kind of gets me off to a good start. And, I think in a lot of ways, that's a good way to find your passion and kind of go with it. But look, this podcast was and is an inspiring one. It's definitely worth listening to, even if you're not a huge fan of Dr. Phil. I think you'll be surprised at how interesting he sounds. And, really, check it out. Thanks a lot for listening, guys, and peace.